There are a few different structures in the market right now, and I don't know if some of the morning conference, but the variety of financing vehicles are available for different scale projects, and they make more or less sense depending on the scale of the project. Most projects, unless it's a direct customer sale, will have a power purchase agreement, so that's kind of a given that a PPA will exist for any project that you're trying to finance. Layered on top of a structure where you have a PPA, an EPC contract, an O&M contract, various site lease arrangements, you'll have to impose your financing on top of that structure. The structures that are common right now are sale leasebacks on the leasing side, and a partnership flip on the non-leasing side. A partnership flip is a very good structure for projects that have very front-ended, front-loaded revenue streams, and those are projects that tend to be in the states where SRECs are predominant, the short-term SREC market, that is. Sale leasebacks are very good for projects that have long, 20-year cash flows that are kind of steady throughout the 20-year term. And it's also good for liquidity because it requires less of an upfront commitment from the developer, because it's usually 100%, more than 100% financed. So those are the two basic structures that are commonly used, and those are the tax equity structures that are available now to developers and participants. The other structures in terms of the MLPs and the REITs, and even the asset-backed securitization is something that is prospective, probably with the asset-backed securities being the most near term.
So I think from my perspective as someone who concentrates on policy, is regardless of whether it's a PPA or a lease scenario, or even a PACE financing system, ultimately what we've started to see, and what I hope we'll continue to see, is that by reducing the upfront cost of solar for the customer, and by making it simpler and more intuitive, and taking some of the uncertainty out of the process for a customer, we'll be able to continue to expand the market, and in that way be able to achieve the volumes needed to continue to reduce costs on a going forward basis. From the residential perspective, we're already starting to see that, and whether it be a PPA in some states, or a lease in others, depending on the company and what makes sense, I think they both offer that essential value proposition. And as for PACE, I think PACE is an excellent concept, and something that everyone's interested in continuing to see develop. And really, from my perspective, the question then will be, how do we address soft costs? As Peter mentioned, it's really what's left to get at as an industry. I think our focus is oftentimes on financing, but ultimately it's going to be a question of how we can deal with the soft costs and continuing to ratchet down the overall cost of solar.
Anybody else? Comments on that?
No, I think I agree with Evan that simplicity will drive. The consumer needs to, it should be very easy for the consumer to make a decision, and for some other customers, maybe the best financial results may trump their decision.
So what's the most common thing you hear from residential clients as to why they did it, or why they're not going to do it?
Yeah, I think what we see is that interest may have been piqued because of some event or some reason. Maybe they talked to a friend, maybe they heard something, maybe the oil spill happened in the Gulf for some reason. That's how they get interested, and they really end up buying when they see it's a very good financial decision for them. The decision to go between a PPA and maybe a purchase or a prepaid PPA might be how they view, what kind of capital they have available, and what kind of financial returns are they looking for. We position it as a financial asset. You're not buying a system, you're actually making a financial decision. and that seems to speak to the consumers.
I guess the only thing I would add is certainly, PPAs are a tried and true vehicle. Of course, in New York, the utilities have mostly gotten out of that business. So the classic kind of utility-driven PPA is not really there anymore, except for perhaps, Long Island. The key thing, though, is, and we talked a lot about the long-term life of these assets. PPAs need to be structured with a lot of flexibility because the situation changes, the market will change, the tariffs will change, and I've seen some long-term PPAs that are just not, were written so narrowly that it really creates equity problems down the road. So just perhaps some thought, thinking about lowering the cost of financing. What would be what would be an ideal PPA structure for for solar investment? It might help lower the cost to put some thought behind that.
Any questions? Okay. In New York State, they have net metering requirements where PV is currently limited to 1% of peak load. These type of arbitrary limits reflect the difficulty assigning costs fairly among users of the power system. What are the potential long-term answers for equitable compensation to provide cash flow necessary to finance behind-the-meter solar power? There's going to be a quiz on this too.
Go on, it's
So I think what you're driving at is the relative cost of net metering to utility customers and how that is spread and addressed. Yeah. Look, I think from our perspective, the benefits associated with distributed solar, the impact they have on the grid, are more than enough to offset any costs borne by the utilities and the majority of the ratepayers. To the extent that we need to see adjustments in net metering as time goes on, I think that'll really be a function of how quickly we can get to a place where we see large-scale adoption and what the future holds for policies that not only involve net metering but the rest of the industry.
Okay. Any other comments?
I guess I would take the position you probably want to start addressing that sooner rather than later. You want to kick the can down the road and say, well, we'll just continue spreading the cost around because it's just so hard to think about an equitable way to do it. The problem is you can get into a Spain situation, I think, where you could have sudden reversals in government policies where somebody says, wow, we've been building up these costs and we haven't figured out a way to allocate them, so we're just going to stop the program. And for long-term financing, you don't want to be in that situation. You want to be comfortable that it's going to be sustainable because mathematically you cannot continue to expand net metering so that nobody's paying for the system.
From the consumer perspective, definitely it's a barrier to entry. There is misinformation again. Some people maybe, if the consumer thinks they won't be able to get the full price for their electricity in the future, they're not likely to invest in a system. So from a policy perspective, I hope that is resolved sooner rather than later.
I think one of the other issues is, with the retail rates, somebody mentioned before that we pay flat rates, and so and some of the costs are fixed. So I know that in June my rate was less, my per kilowatt hour rate was less than it was in say March, even though in June the wholesale prices were twice as high as they were in March. So we create this sort of a flat structure that doesn't perhaps provide enough compensation during the peak hours when solar is most valuable, and then say, well, we have to make up the payment somehow, so we'll give you this net metering incentive. And maybe there's just a smarter way to do it that's more reflective of the economics of the system.
Okay. It seems like one one of the panelists actually sent me a comment, and basically they were saying that the most beneficial structures from our experience as integrators has been the provision of long-term stable revenue structure with creditworthy utility or off-takers. So you have various programs, especially Long Island has been getting a lot of comments, and the Connecticut ZREC program and the New Jersey programs. But what doesn't seem to work is upfront rebates or grants, market-driven recs that do not encourage long-term contracting, and SREC floors that have no teeth. So it goes back to our earlier conversation about financing, and that is, you can't say, well, we guarantee you 20 cents for 3 years, and then after that, we'll see. That's not gonna work. So people, as investors, want to see, a stable cash flow over time. And the question becomes, a lot of these